Welcome, I'm Stephanie Hancock, and this week I'm filling in for Nancy Ulrich, and this is Far More Colorado, a show where we discuss music, news, and things of interest for Colorado and Coloradans. This week we have a special treat for you. Our guest is the legendary jazz pianist, Joe Bonner. Welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
It is such a pleasure and a delight to talk with you today. And I want this opportunity for us to get together and talk to those people who don't know who you are, and also to just give a little history and background about you, your music, the projects that you're working on right now.
Yes, well, I've been in this town for some years, and I've played jazz around town in a lot of different places, and I can tell the difference in the changes of the city over a period of a lot of years. But I still think that there's a good vibration and a good hope that more people will come out and listen to jazz music and hear my new band.
Fantastic. Let's get a little bit of history and background on you, because I know that jazz is something that develops over a period of time in swing and feel. So let's talk about some of your earliest influences. Now, you were born in North Carolina, correct?
Yes, I was born in a place called Rocky Mount, North Carolina. It's the same hometown as the great Thelonious Monk.
And as a youngster, your grandfather he worked at a church, correct? And he took you and you played organ at the church and as a youngster?
Yeah, my grandfather was keeping the heat working in the church, fixing the furnace. And while I waited for him, I sat on the organ. I was so short, my feet couldn't even reach the bottom of the pedals. But I played the organ while my grandfather fixed the heat for the church. And this happened every day, so I got used to playing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So your mother was an educated woman, right? She had a college degree, and your dad was a porter or worked on the railroad?
My father was a brick mason and built houses and was a contractor.
Okay.
And he took me with him sometimes, and we could build a brick house in about 6 months.
Wow.
And he paid me a minimal fee and kept me with him. And my grandfather, and the music, it starts in the whole family. So everybody in my family played piano. So I had two pianos, one around the corner at my grandmother's and one at my house. And when I finally came home at 8 years old, I came home one day and my father had a brand new piano sitting in the living room.
So everyone played piano in your house.
That's right.
And so what child are you in the family?
Well, my sister was about 8 years older than me.
Okay.
And we fought each other just to get to the piano. Every time I wanted to play, she wanted to play.
Okay. And so when you were 11 years old, your family, you moved to Harlem, or did your whole family move to Harlem?
No, they sent me to Harlem every summer. And they finally moved me there because they were putting my sister through college. So I grew up in Harlem, spending all my summers there. And I ended up staying there and going to places like the Count Basie's Club on 137th Street and 7th Avenue. And I went to the Apollo every Saturday. And we stayed in the Apollo with my basketball buddies. And we saw James Brown's midnight show every night. And finally, I met all the real masters. And Wilt Chamberlain was there in his club. And I ended up meeting Roy Haynes, Max Roach, and Abby Lincoln. And it was very interesting.
Now, I know, I'm being from the North myself, being from Pittsburgh. I know that folks would send their kids from the North to the South. So in your case, you went from North Carolina to the North. And so seeing all that rich talent, I understand that you actually met Sugar Ray Robinson when he was in his prime as a youngster.
Well, I was only 11 years old. And we were all excited to see people like Ali and Sugar Ray and Joe Louis, Lena Horne. We saw them every day.
Oh, wow.
And then they went to hear jazz music all the time during that time. And that was a culture. It was a very rich culture of being exposed as a child in Harlem. And that's what made me love jazz.
And so you went to Virginia State University to major in music back in that time. And so you were just a kid then, what, 17, 18 years old when you went to
Exactly.
college?
Yeah.
And so you majored in what instrument when you went to school there?
I was a piano major at first, and then I changed my major to the tuba.
Now, why did you do that?
Because through college and high school, well, I had some friends in New York, and I liked the sound of the tuba horn. And I was friends with Howard Johnson, Joe Daly, and Howard Johnson was the greatest tuba player in the jazz world.
Yes, he is.
And he had 8 tubas in his band, and he got to know me, and he bought me some tuba horn, and I practiced with him every day. And so my mother bought me Alexander from Germany, and then I started to do my senior recital, graduation, on the tuba.
Wow.
So I played piano and tuba.
My goodness, that must have been just exciting. I understand that you also did some arrangements for marching bands with the tuba and college bands for halftime shows and that sort of thing.
I did that all the way through college. And also, when I did my recital, I played some very classically interesting things on the tuba horn by people like Roger Bobo, William Bell, Alec Wilder, Paul Hindemith, and Bach. I played a lot of classical songs on the tuba, but I could also swing on the tuba. So.
And which a lot of people can't do. That's what I love about Howard Johnson, because the first time I heard him was on the Midnight Special way back in the 70s, and that band just killed. They slaughtered. It was awesome, and I just loved hearing them. But piano is your primary instrument, so once you graduated from college, I understand your dad gave you the keys to the car and said, go on to New York and make it big, son. Is that a true story, or is that just something somebody made up?
I'm surprised that you found that out. It's amazing that people can find out information like that. I was getting my degree, and I got a call from Max Roach. And as soon as I got it, I drove to New York, and I was with Max Roach.
Now, you were just a kid then, right? 22?
I was 22.
Yeah.
And Max Roach was a friend of my family in North Carolina. And my uncle was a pastor of a church in Brooklyn. It was called... I think it was on Putnam and Marcy Street. And Max Roach went to my uncle's church. So I felt for some reason that maybe my uncle told Max to look out for me. But I ended up staying with Max for a long time.
And I understand one of your first big pay gigs was at the Crawford Grill in Pittsburgh. And the reason why I'm so excited about that is because I'm from Pittsburgh and I know the Crawford Grill. Too young to go there. Mother wouldn't allow me to go over in the Hill District to the Crawford Grill. But I understand that was a really good paying gig for you back then.
That was a lot of information there. I don't know how you found that out. That's very interesting. And that was our first gig with Max Roach. And Billy Harper was the saxophone player. Jimmy Merritt was on bass. And Max Roach and myself, and we were at Crawford's Grill.
That was a jazz mecca back in the day. I mean, Ellington and as you know, there were a lot of people from Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh area,
Billy
like Lena Horne,
Eckstein.
Billy Eckstein, and
Yeah.
lots of those folks would just play. It was like one of those hub places everybody could go and hang out and hone their chops. So would you say this was a laboratory for you to hone your chops and to really get the swing and know how to swing the way you do now?
It was very exciting. And Max Roach is a great teacher. And I met Dakota Stanton there. And Abby Lincoln came there. And we spent about 10 days at Crawford Grill. And it was very interesting, some of the people that you meet there. Stanley Turrentine and a lot of other great musicians came out of Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
It was a great experience
time.
for me being just having graduated with a bachelor's degree and join Max Roach and then go from there to Roy Haynes and from there to Freddie Hubbard. So I had a pretty rich career. So I was very happy about that.
And so in that transition, you also ended up playing with the legendary Pharoah Saunders. So tell me about this period, because I understand that you did a lot of road work during that time with him, traveling around and learning and playing. And, getting spiritually connected with him.
That's true. And the thing is about Pharoah Saunders' teachings is that I had met him that same night in New York. And I went to see John Coltrane at the Village Vanguard. During that time, you could see John Coltrane for $3.50.
Wow.
And I met Pharoah Saunders that night. And we made friends. He doesn't talk very much. But the next thing I knew, we started getting together on 77th Street between West End and Riverside. And I was playing with Freddie Hubbard during that time. So we played in Philadelphia at the Aqua Lounge. Freddie Hubbard, Louis Hayes, Wayne Dockery, and we had Carlos Garnett, James Spaulding. It was a wonderful band. And Pharoah Saunders and I were hooking up, connecting. And I would go over to his house, and his wife would cook curry food, dinner. So finally, I decided to leave Freddie and join Pharoah, which was kind of strange for Freddie to accept. But Freddie was a very worldly person, and we traveled a lot together. Pharoah had another concept as being spiritual and key to diet and health and lifestyles. So I was interested in what he was teaching me. So I stayed with him for a long period of time. We came to Denver during that time.
How did that experience influence you on a musical perspective? Where did that take you?
Pharoah's music is related to Coltrane. Coltrane was very much melodic, but Pharoah was much more supernatural and surrealistic. He could play 5 notes at one time. And some of the things he did on the horn, Coltrane didn't do, because Coltrane would play very lyrical and poetic. But Pharoah was completely creative, and that was a big difference. And I was in between both of those concepts. So it was interesting, and I did a lot of recording with Pharoah. So one reason that I left from Freddie Hubbard and joined Pharoah Saunders, I made about 8 different CDs with him or more. And the records were very great. All of them were still selling. So Pharoah gave me a pretty great education. And when I left him, I joined Billy Harper, and we went to Europe together.
And so that takes you to, Amsterdam, Paris,
Oh, yes.
London.
Yeah. So it's a learning experience.
And then you finally ended up in Copenhagen. Tell me about your Copenhagen experience. I know you did some work, and I know a lot of the CDs that I see online are from Steeplechase Records. So tell me a little bit about that time period and that experience.
I think that's a very good company for someone in my situation. And my first recording as a leader was after I had spent like 2 or 3 summers in Europe with Billy Harper. And he was teaching me how to get around Europe and keep your passport and your immigrations in order. And finally, I made a deal with Steeplechase. And I did about 9 or 10 records for them. And they're still selling in Europe. So they did a lot of good recordings on me, and they're still printing them. And then I had some experiences, and I played at the Adelon Hotel, the Montmartre Club, and I played with people like Ed Thigpen, Sahib Shahab, Ernie Wilkins, and some of the great real jazz people who lived in Copenhagen. Copenhagen.
So what would you say your style of playing was during that time? Because it's kind of different than the way you play today. So during that period, what would you say your influences? I know you said they were Pharoah Saunders and those folks, but what were you playing? What was going on in your head during that time?
I was influenced by people like being in Denmark. There were a lot of great jazz musicians who had lived there historically and culturally. And my favorite was Dexter Gordon. And I just thought he was the greatest Dane, black Dane. And we met. And as a matter of fact, Thad Jones moved to Copenhagen. And he was appointed as the minister of music in the Danish school system. He chose the curricula for Danish music students.
Wow.
So he had a great position. And we met, he passed, and I didn't get a chance to. But I had been in Thad's band in New York for some time. And so I stayed there for a while. And then finally I had to go back to Harlem because of my family. And then I just felt like the intensity and what you have to do to be a jazz musician in New York, you have to really go through a lot of sometimes adverse situations to get back to the bandstand and be comfortable. So I came out to Denver, and I thought that the mountains and the lifestyle was a little bit more manageable and more comfortable. So I decided to spend more time here.
And so being here, coming to the Mile High City and settling in here, how long did it take you to really fit into the jazz scene here? I know at the time what was happening, the Peck was El Chapultepec was always the place to go and play back in the day, and it still is now. So how did you manage to, make your connections here in Denver and become really the fixture that you are?
I knew a couple of drummers that lived in town, and one piano player's name was Bob Palmer. And the drummer's name had played with Herbie Mann, Bruno Carr. And we met. We were in New York, so I knew him. And there was another drummer named Larry Wild Rice. And he was married to Dinah Washington. However, I did get around town and meet some people like Hazel Miller and some other people like Roxanne Brown and Louise Duncan. I met people in the community, Billy Tolles, and I was going to the Peck to listen every night, so I just kind of inadvertently became a part of the community. And I ended up playing at Eugene Bass and D minor. We had a group at a place called Blues and Beans. It was right across the street from what's now Dazzles.
Ah, okay.
And that was on 9th and Lincoln.
Okay.
But the whole neighborhood has changed.
Right.
So Wellington Webb changed that whole neighborhood. And consequently, little by little, I became part of the community here.
Now, you've worked with a lot of vocalists in town, too, as a side man or just really I remember once you told me, because we've had the opportunity to do some work together on a CD, that you could play the whole orchestra just on piano. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, that's interesting. It's just the idea of being alone, And I've done a lot of duets with singers. And to tell the truth, it's kind of much easier for a piano player to play with the singer and not have to worry about the bass player or what the drummer is doing. Just me and her. And if she slows down, then I'll slow down. And if she speeds up, then I'll speed up without having to turn around and tell the bass player what to do. So that was very interesting, and I did quite a bit of that with different singers around town. Marguerite German. I don't think I ever played with Lanny Garrett, but there were some other singers that I played with. And a lot of those have went to San Francisco and became great stars, I guess.
Wow. And so you really have a footprint on a lot of instrumentalists, a lot of vocalists, a lot of people over the course of time, just being who you are and being that guy that people can go to and work with, would you say?
I would just have an idea of being someone who's not only musically developed, but socially and culturally aware, And I like to get to know people and find out their mannerisms and what they like and how they perform on the bandstand. And, my grandfather told me, he said, if you're good, you can make anybody sound good.
So let me ask you, Joe, what do you think? Do you think the term legend is thrown around too casually these days?
No, it's a legend is you live through what you lived through. That's what makes you a legend. That you walk through the hell and still alive. That's a legend, man.
Yeah, yeah.
I walked through New York City all those years and I'm still here. But legendary means you have stories to tell.
And everybody has a story. They just don't always know that.
Yeah,
Right.
it's true.
So when you create music, when you're composing your music, you get your inspiration from a number of places. Do you
Your
have
history, man. Yeah, your existence. I can go all the way back to when I was a baby. I can remember things that happened to me when I was 4 years old. I can remember those things. I remember moments, you know?
and then they're reflected in your music?
Yeah. Yeah.
And who would you say were some of your earliest influences in terms of your composition style?
Let's see. As a writer, I was influenced mostly by Samuel Barber, Aaron Copland, and Schoenberg. And I was in Harlem, and I saw people like Bobby Timmons, Art Tatum, Fats Waller, every night in after-hour places after the gig. They would go down in Harlem, back in the chicken shack, sit down and play all night long. They had gangsters and cocaine and everything in the door, man. Guns and all that. And they would go down there after the gig. And wouldn't be surprised to see somebody like John Hammond or George Gershwin up there watching the black girls dance and learning their choreography. Go back up downtown to Columbia and get rich. Harlem has a rich culture, Jelly Roll Morton. But I saw people like that every night, Roy Haynes and Max Roach and them. And after the gig, Roy Haynes would take me back to some old New York townhouses, go way back in the backyard. Chickens, like, Sugar Hill or something. And then go downstairs, and they got this after-hour, all-night joint. People swinging. And I saw that when I was like 12, 13 years old. Eh?
And that's not something you can fake.
No, because people are living that. Junkies coming in with electric blankets and color TVs, hustling so they can get their dope.
Wow. Wow.
I saw all that.
Wow.
I saw what makes you want to play.
And so what do you think about these young pianists and the so-called smooth jazz of today?
I think that I listen to, what's K-High?
Yeah.
Jackie Ward? Yeah, I listen to that sometimes. And I like Grover Washington sometimes. I mean, I can get a groove. I can get a groove. But I really do value that Harlem history.
So everybody has that one musician that just totally blew their mind in their earlier days. And I'm sure you have one for you like that as well. Who would you say that musician was?
I would have to say that being in New York, living in New York so many years, it would have to be Miles Davis. But he was the most exciting jazz musician in New York City. And his whole lifestyle and his freedom and his quality was just so immaculate, the way he lived. It was just so all-encompassing. And I lived next door to him for like about 10 months.
Wow.
Before I drove to Denver.
And his musicianship, what did his style of music, how did that influence you?
History in a way. And then he was so hip and modern, and that he followed up to the hipness and the futuristic projections. And he was a musical genius and a Gemini. We never talked very much, and I never played in his band. Why would he want me? He's got Keith Jarrett, Chick Corea, Herbie Hancock, all the greatest pianists in the world. I was just a next-door neighbor. And we would just have a conversation once in a while. So I thought he was the biggest jazz figure that ever went through New York City.
And then Bertha Cool, and then the collaboration with
it
Dave
all.
Brubeck. I mean, and you know, Dave Brubeck just passed away not long ago.
I heard about that.
Yeah. So going forward, where do you see yourself creatively with music?
Well, what I see now is I have some music that I've written recently, and what I have is I have piano, bass, drums, harp, and four French horns. 4 French horns and 3 violins. And I'm trying to find a venue so I could get it recorded.
Oh, that sounds exciting. Do you have a name for this project?
Yeah, the whole thing is called Evenings Sunset.
Nice. I am so looking forward to hearing that, Joe.
Yeah, it's going to sound kind of like Quincy Jones kind of thing, you know.
Nice.
Gil Evans.
Yeah, that's exciting. That is exciting. So it sounds like you've got quite a bit of projects on the boiler, ready to be displayed and showcased and let the world see what you're working on.
Yeah, I did an album in Copenhagen. I did an album called Sweet for Chocolate. Sweet, S-U-I-T-E, Sweet for Chocolate. And I have it all arranged for ensembles. It's 4 French horns, 3 violins, a tuba, and a harp, and viola, and I want to be able to have those arrangements recorded someday.
Well, hopefully we will be able to see that happen. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Thanks so much, Joe.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
you taking time to spend with us today.
Thank you. And I wish Denver, Colorado the best in the quality of what jazz music is. Whether it's funky, or whether it's spiritual, or whether it still swings, there's no limits.
Enough said.
Far More Colorado is a public affairs interview program highlighting people of interest to Coloradans. The program has guests from our state government, and we also feature a wide variety of other guests who are making a difference here in Colorado.